Join us on the last bus home.
And that's why men have a little hidden nipple.
Grim.
An extra one, yeah.
Anyway, mate.
How are we doing?
Are we starting season 2?
Season 2. We're going to bring our listener some more, another bombshell full of joy, ennui, nausea, and maybe combat some of that insomnia.
Oh, like
You
it.
know what I mean?
Like it.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be covering The Mirrored Men.
The Mirrored
I'm not
Men,
mistaken.
yeah. Right, The Mirrored Men, a little bit of background on it. It first got dropped on the human race by Derek Hayes. He's a bit of a podcast mover. Been listening to him for many years. He runs the Monsters Among Us podcast, so anyone who wants to have an entertaining 19 seasons, jump over there.
Yeah, to say the guy's prolific would be an understatement.
Yeah, it may be his job, but he runs quite a unique podcast in my eyes in the paranormal sector. People ring in and leave him a story of their own, and then he'll drop his wisdom on it. Now, all these stories are coming from the mouths of the witnesses or family members of the witnesses, and it's really quite addictive. I'm going to be honest, I've spent hours listening to it. Now, The Mirrored Men was first brought to Derek in, I believe, 2016. And what mirrored men are is it's usually 2 or 3 people who look exactly alike in appearance but may vary in heights, but they move in unison. And sometimes they're up to like 7 feet tall, and they all walk in a line, either one behind the other or diagonally, and all their movements are exactly the same, and like they all turn their heads together. Everything is all exactly the same. And most people who see them, they're usually in quite rural areas or liminal spaces, like areas which, you'd expect to be busy, but there's nobody there, kind of like a half-built estate or maybe an abandoned area or something. And nobody seems to be able to make out facial details. There is talk of like wide-lipped mouths and kind of mesmerizing eyes, but generally people see features in their mind rather than physically. They imagine what they've seen, in the face. But one thing that kind of matches them all together is whoever does experience them and I believe make, I put air quotes, eye contact with them, there's missing time of, anything from half an hour to like 8 hours. There's people just wake up later and they've just lost time. And this first came about, like I say, on the Monsters Among Us podcast. I think it was called Here There Be Monsters or something before the name changed. But since that came about, Derek has had many more people call in because people have heard it and gone, because I think a lot of people have had the experience but not linked it to anything else. Like just thought, maybe they saw 3 weirdos or whatever, 3 ghosts, so they don't really know. And it's kind of took off in its own way among certain groups. So
So it's mainly due to the behaviour that we're sort of separating these from, say, let's say like the shadow people or any of those kind of cryptids.
Yeah, no, none of these things appear to be particularly dangerous. I think what messes with people's heads is the way they walk. But the fact that there's 3, maybe 4 or 2, just it's the fact they're moving exactly the same way. It's like there's one brain controlling them or something. Now,
So these boys travel in a gang. It's always 2 or 3 or 4.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're not a particularly heavily studied phenomena, so they could appear in singles, but then I doubt they'd be linked to mirrored men because if there's one of them, the weird part is the fact that they're all moving the same way. So if it's just one of them, it's just a drunk guy or a meth head. I don't know. You know,
I see. And are we just saying mirrored men, or do we have any mirrored ladies?
we can say mirrored people if you want, but they do have. I mean, what I would recommend is going over to the Monsters Among Us podcast, and if you do it online, I'm sure you can filter out a load of mirrored men experiences because the 3 like exactly the same people, or then sometimes there's like 2 short ones and a tall one, like the Aryan alien people that we hear about, you know, like the elf looking like sort of people.
Yep.
But there's always at least one male, but the others are usually male. There's usually a female there. It doesn't matter. So, what I've got the original story. So, I'm going to have to treat you to my reading voice as usual, because it's quite a long one. And then I've got a little short one for you. Oh, and then I've got my favourite one. And then there's a couple of accounts. So I've got various bits for you. Then we can move on to some theories, and we'll see what Lee thinks.
Cool. And are these sightings or these stories you're about to lay on me, or just, general tales? Do we have confirmation of these?
No confirmation. I'm taking people's word for it because,
Okay.
the holy grail of the paranormal genre is evidence. Do you know what I mean?
Hey, you know me. Truth until proof.
Hey, I do know you, and if anyone's listened to the last 2 episodes of our last season, we know Lee is up for it.
Hell yeah.
So let's begin. This one takes place in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm going to point it about at the mid-90s. Okay, so this is the original from the Monsters Among Us. I've cleaned it up a bit, so all the ums and ers and mumbles and that I've took out, but the story still remains. So, hey, I just want to tell you thanks first and foremost for letting me tell the story here, and forgive me for a few of the details are a little bit fuzzy, but about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, however, what little I saw sticks with me and still kind of freaks me out to this day. So, like I said, this is about 20, maybe even 21 years ago. I wasn't even quite yet a teenager, and my family just moved from our old house to a brand new house, and it was just built, but the development itself was still very incomplete. A lot of dirt lots, basements already kind of dug out, construction stuff all over the place, and kind of like that, stuff like that, and definitely a safe place for young kids to run about and be an idiot in. Now, I just want to jump in here. Either this man's been misled, or I have been misled by my own mum, because I was told construction sites were not a good place for me to run around and be an idiot in.
Did you ever break into one back in your day?
Like I said, my mum's listening to this. I can't talk to you. Okay, and I
think it's a rite of passage.
Yeah, I just don't think there's a. time limit on these crimes, to be honest.
There ain't no kid that hasn't broken to at least one construction yard in its life, because it is, and you know damn well it is, a whole place of fun.
It absolutely is. So, anyway, this would have been maybe after the first full year in the house. It must have been almost early summer, maybe even late spring. I just remember it was warm out. I was dead asleep in my room, but then suddenly I had this urge and felt very compelled to wake up. Not like in a jumpy sort of way, but something startled me. But I was just very alert, very awake, and this was a little bit after 2 a.m. And I also felt compelled to walk over to one of my bedroom windows. So I walked over and I sort of crouched down so I could see out the window a little bit better. There were some trees in our front yard. They're probably gone now, but there's some trees on our front yard that blocked my view. But you could still kind of see all the way down to the corner of the street. You can't now. Like I said, this was a new development at the time and there weren't many houses at the time. And the view will probably be blocked from that same window. So anyway, as I'm peering down, looking at this corner, I see 3 figures walking away from my house. They're maybe 200 or 300 feet away, somewhere in that range, and kind of moving, like I said, moving away from the house. So I'm watching for a long moment, and I don't know why I felt compelled to go over to the window and take a peek. But while I was watching these figures, I noticed that I just can't glean any detail. I mean, there's even the street light down the street a bit, but it's like there's not enough light for me to make out exactly who or what was walking down the street. But I could see more or less the dark outlines of the people. But it was really strange. As I was watching them, I noticed they were all moving in unison, almost perfectly synced together. They're sort of not quite in a straight line, almost like an angled line, walking down what would become the sidewalk. But it was just kind of like a dirt path at the time. They're also very, very slow, even though they're moving kind of constantly. That didn't seem like any of their movements were any kind of hurry. They just sort of almost like glided down the street. So I was watching them for a very long moment, and all 3 of them stop. And I don't know how to explain it, even though I couldn't really make out any detail. I could tell that they all sort of turned their heads to look at me. There's nothing else on the street, so there's no cars or other people walking around. Like I said, it was a new development. There wasn't much really out there by where we lived at that point. And all 3 of them at the same time, like I said, they moved in unison. They craned their heads, at least as far as I could tell, to look at me. I don't know if you could make eye contact with something that can't really see a face on, but I feel like we made eye contact for a moment. Whatever I was looking at, they knew that I was watching them, and they were watching me for a long moment. So anyway, as I'm leaning there, I just kind of remember blinking and going blink, blink again, and I'm leaning face first against my window in the exact same position. I was kind of kneeling there before, but now it's about 9 o'clock, maybe just before 9 o'clock. All 3 of them, all 3 of the figures, turned around, craned their neck just to look at me. And like I said, they all moved in unison, so I could see the movements happening at the same time, with that weird moment where I knew they were watching me and I knew I was watching them. And it was just kind of weird, kind of tense moment. I don't know what to do. I just kind of sat there, just kept staring, and then everything just kind of went blank. Not in a pass-out kind of way, just felt like a very long blink. When I opened my eyes again, I was still in the same position, kind of kneeling down, looking at the window. My face pressed up against the glass in the window, but instead of it being 2 a.m., it was just about 9 a.m., maybe just a little before. I had blinked and misplaced about 7 hours worth of time. Obviously, there's the weird figures at the end of the street by the corner, but it still really freaks me out 20 years later. Like I said, some of the details are still a bit off, but so, I don't know how far away they were, or what time of year it was necessarily, but I still remember that moment when they turned around and looked at me, knowing that I was watching them. Still kind of runs a chill through my spine. And anyway, thanks for letting me tell the story, and hopefully I don't experience anything like that ever again.
Nice. So I definitely see the difference in the stories there, because this one seemed to be, they were a lot more sentient. They weren't just like this entity that really takes it from the name. They mirror what the person's seeing, I guess. But these are a bit more like, we know you're there, that kind of thing. A lot more scarier, might I add.
Yeah, I think. I mean, in itself, it's not scary. It's just the thought of. I don't know. It's just the moving in you. I think it's worrying because it's weird. I don't know.
The scary part is, what the hell are they up to?
Yes,
Is it
shady
bad?
shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
but we'll see. We'll see what the theories throw out. So another story. This is a short one. This came from Reddit. Now, when I was looking for that original story that we've just had, I was looking. I was guided towards a certain episode of Monsters Among Us, which was season 2, episode 4, I think. And listening back to it, I couldn't find it. But there was a story on there from a hunter. Now, this story on Reddit is there's slight differences, but it's very similar to this Reddit one I'm about to read. One story that was particularly creepy was of a hunter sitting in a deer hide. That's one of those, either a platform up in a tree that they stand on in order to unleash freedom on deer and stuff, or maybe a little tent that's disguised as a bush.
You never know.
All with the purpose of magazines of freedom to get the meat. So he was sitting there for a few hours when he realised all the bird calls and general animal noises had stopped. And he saw 3 men walk from east to west in the distance. They had slow, strange movements in perfect sync. He grabbed his rifle and looked through the gun sight to get a better look, and as soon as he did, the men turned their heads and looked straight where he was hidden 8 meters up in a tree hide. They started walking towards him, and he felt pure terror. And he woke up on the ground at the base of the hide. His gun barrel was embedded in the dirt as if it had fallen with great force. And it was night time and really cold, about 6 hours from when he had last checked his watch.
So we got that time dilation in there again. Like you said, it seems to be a bit of a common theory.
That's one of the common
I'm definitely getting aliens. I'm not going to lie. Straight from the...
You're going straight there.
Straight there, mate. It just seems the more logical route to go down. I just think it's the behaviours. I would have gone down the more, say, paranormal ghost route if they did appear as just these freaky mirrored entities that did the creepy smile, which I know we might have a story about. But, that's a lot more horror film. This seems to be, it's almost a sniff of the government in there as well. Maybe a little bit touch of Men in Black, but it's like they're watching, but they're not watching. They don't want you to be watching. Yeah, it's got aliens written all over it.
Now, so you're marrying into one of my favourite theories, but it's not aliens.
You reckon?
No, and it's not creepy smiles, nor is it your creepy smile. That's reserved for after 10:30 in an evening.
You know it.
But that's another story. We'll leave that in Grimsby. So, this next one, I love it. Honestly, this is my favourite tale. It's been related to Mirror Men, but not as a Mirrored Men story. Okay? Now, there's an author from the early 2000s called Shand Kisandi. He wrote some books called Eerie Tales 1 and followed it up with the classic Eerie Tales 2.
Nice.
I mean, as far as sequels go, I like it. So, in one of his books, He's said to have received a strange report, so this tells me it's not fiction. I mean, could be, but I don't think it's a story written by Shan Kazandi. You know, he's been told, because I believe these books of his are people giving his tales. Yeah, he received a strange report in the early 2000s involving a police officer named Terence, now retired. Terence felt it was time to tell his story of what he encountered one afternoon while out on patrol in the Australian outback. Terence claims that at the time he was out perusing a remote area on his BMW R1150 RT police bike. I don't know my bikes, but that one sounds good enough to mention the style of bike it is. So
Sounds like a bike only a playboy would ride.
a truth-telling policeman would ride, and quick. And I'm sure it's a fast bike too. And if the Australian outback, if Mad Max came true and it did become a post-apocalyptic war zone, I'd like to think that the R1150 RT police bike would still be usable and driven by the leader of a semi-clad S&M style gang.
Hell yeah. Cannibals.
Or cannibals. Or both. Anyway, it was dusty and he decided to pull off on the first adjacent road. And how grown up am I? Right. I apologise for that. It came from nowhere. I wasn't.
Hey, when you got to go, you got to go.
When you've got a nice bike and you're in the middle of nowhere, you're going to pull off on the first adjacent road.
You know what it's about.
And clean the collected dirt off his visor. The road was quiet and he noted that the trees lined both sides of the road. He took a sip of water and proceeded to use the water to clean off his gear.
Where the hell did you pluck this story from? Readers' Wives?
God, I read Playboy for the articles, honestly. Right. So, as he looked around the isolated lane, he began to hear the faint sound of an engine roar. The burring sound was coming from the far end of the road. So he slipped on his helmet and inched his bike forward. The roaring sound got louder, and ahead near a berm was a raised earth platform. He assumed it was reserved for a housing estate, or although he couldn't see the source of the sound from the road level, a rising cloud of dust made it obvious that the sound was coming from the higher ground. Terence proceeded to stop his bike and make his way up the steep slope. He struggled to make the 2-metre climb using his hands to pull him over the edge of the slope. He glanced over and observed about 50 metres away an old black 1953 Chevrolet going round in circles. Terence tried to see if the driver was all right, wondering if he may have had a heart attack or something that rendered him unconscious, but the sun's glare on the Chevy's windscreen and the red cloud of dust surrounding the car made it impossible. Concerned, Terence pulled himself over the slope and stood on the edge of the plateau. He could see everything. He couldn't see everything, but he didn't know why the car wouldn't be going in. Sorry, he couldn't see why the car would be going in circles like that. And given where he was certain the driver could see him and must have recognised that he was a policeman. For whatever reason, the driver kept going in circles. Terence waved at the driver to get his attention, but the driver never stopped. I wonder if the driver has been shot and his foot remains weighted down on the accelerator pedal, or some hoons are playing around with a stolen car. Or maybe this, or maybe that. I forced myself to stop assuming and gathered the courage to investigate, says Terence. As Terence made his way toward the vehicle, he began to get a cold chill up his spine. He looked into the window, and occasionally, when the glass was not reflecting the bright light of the sun, he was able to make out there were 2 very large people with long hair inside, sitting in the front seats. Given the length of the hair, Terence assumed they might be females, but big ones. Terence approached the vehicle cautiously, getting to within 20 metres, and when the vehicle stopped for some reason, Terence recalled that the sight of the stopped car frightened him, and he actually considered turning around and leaving. He didn't wait until the dust settled. Terence was finally able to get a good look at the two people in the car. He ordered them out of the vehicle, but they did not move. Terence began to grow angry and ordered them a second time to exit the vehicle, and this time they did. As they stepped out, he could see them clearly. Their faces were expressionless. They stood easily 7 foot tall, and the strangest thing, they looked exactly alike. And they were also both wearing sunglasses, although these were unlike anything Terence had ever seen before. I have never seen mirrored glasses that shine like them. They vary in their colours, sometimes blue, sometimes red, sometimes a shade of green, and even give out a peculiar sound, a machine-like ringing. And what makes it strange is that the ringing only happened when I see the glare of the sun in the mirrored lenses. The sound seems to come out from my own ears, says Terence. Terence became increasingly more frightened as the situation progressed. Though his training allowed him to maintain a straight face, he hadn't pulled his weapon yet, fearing that the two men would assume he was a threat. As they stared at each other, the two men suddenly sidestepped away from the Chevy, so they were now fully exposed. The weird thing to Terence was that when they stepped away the vehicle, it was completely in sync, like he was watching a mirror image of the same person. Both men wore mud-stained jeans, held up by leather belts and dishevelled shirts, neither tucked in nor out. Terence wondered if they were playing with him. Just then, the two men began to walk towards him, their arms at their sides. Terence ordered them to halt, but they didn't. They continued to advance in his direction. Feeling his life was in danger, Terence ordered them to stop and raise their hands. Even though they are not carrying weapons, I feel nervous and I tremble with every step they take closer to me. Since they haven't stopped, I feel no other choice but to draw my weapon, and as I do, the two lanky figures get closer, moving in sync. Terence can see even clearer now. They appear to be mirror images of each other. They seem unfazed by the gun, and eventually the two men stepped away from each other, moving away at angles as if to get around the officer. Since they were not carrying firearms, Terence allowed them to continue to walk apart and encircle him. They walked within 20 metres of either side of him, eventually forming a straight line on either side. Terence became quite uncertain of what to do, and if they both he felt uncertain what to do if they both came at him. Would he have time to defend himself, he wondered. The two men just kept walking, eventually turning their faces away from him as if he wasn't there. This angered Terence, who ordered them to stop. They did not. He even assumed that maybe they were deaf, which was why they were not responding to his commands. Terence watched as they continued to walk up the slope away from him, and then they did something bizarre. So bizarre, it caused Terence to question what he was seeing was real. They stepped right at the edge of the plateau, and they're in coordination no matter what they do, and then their heads turn, just the heads, not the bodies. I get ready to shout out, get on the ground, but they do something that shoots icy arrows up my spine. Their heads have turned as much as any human's head can turn, but they don't stop there. The heads turn some more. They have now turned 180 degrees, but they still do not stop. Their heads have turned a complete circle, 360 degrees. These men can't be human, I scream in my head, says Terence. The sight of this became too much for the officer, who fell to his knees. My knees jellify and hit the ground. My face is numb and my jaw hangs loosely as my vision spirals. With absolute indifference to a nervous gun pointed at their backs, the spindly giants calmly walk down the slope and disappear behind the dirt horizon. Seeing them gone, I'm able to breathe again. In the midst of the excitement, I'd forgotten about the Chevy. Turning around, Terence was shocked to see that the Chevy was gone, and it hadn't driven away on its own, nor was it buried in the sand. It was just gone. From there, things went off the rails. Terence remembered feeling an intense desire to vomit. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, it was now dark. When he knelt down, it was still afternoon. However, when he opened his eyes a second later, it was now night time. He was still in the kneeling position. God, how long have I been kneeling like this, he wondered. He eventually returned to his motorcycle and left the area. Fearing ridicule by his fellow officers, Terence never spoke of the bizarre incident. He waited until he was retired to tell author Cassandi about the experience.
Man. So we got time dilation again.
Yep. And this time we had two, but more kind of modern clothes.
Yeah, that was interesting. Seems to be, like we mentioned at the start, some sort of hive mind, but also like they're kind of tethered. Do you know what I mean? Like they'll mirror each other's movements, but they are kind of separate. It's cool. I like it. It's creepy guys.
Yeah. Okay, last story. The reason I've got, I could sit all night reading Mirrored Men stories, but these three they vary. You see, there's a different. The first one we've got the three who turn and look. Then we've got the two, and then this one number doesn't matter. I think it's three again, but what they do is different in this one. Now, this one's a really long one, so what I've done, I've cut it down to just kind of relevant bits. So this one is, I went down a wee rabbit hole, I'll be honest. So here we go. My story took place around 93, 94, so around the same time as the first one, I peg it.
Yeah.
I was 18 years old and living in a small town in southern Utah. They go on to say they're out and about with their mates late at night, driving around, like being kids. Suddenly, I look up from our shenanigans, and there in front of me were 6 men crossing the lane directly in front of us. All 6 men, however, were walking in single file, which seemed rather odd and unnerving for that hour of the night. All in step, with a straight back, facing forward, same height, all crossing from the right corner where a mortuary stood.
A bit like that Beatles album cover.
I was thinking more the Madness album cover, but yeah.
You got it.
But, so yeah, they were all in step from the right corner where a mortuary stood. That fact didn't stand out at the time, and it really didn't cross his mind until years later when sharing the location of the incident. All crossing from the right to left where a school bus garage and Baptist church stood on the opposite corner. So I'm guessing they're crossing the junction diagonally. We were frozen, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. It looked out of place for this time of night, or for any time really, and something was weird. Our frozen observance was quickly broken by a friend ordering me to follow them. When the light turned green, I made a quick left turn to follow them between the garage and the church. We rolled down our windows, laughing at the oddity and searching for an understanding of this bizarre scene through our laughter. You could hear several of us questioning, "What are you guys doing?" Without saying a word, they continued marching in sync and staring straight ahead. We were met with only a profile of 6 faces, which only piqued our curiosity further, so we inquired again and again. With no relenting, they were not responded to. Then suddenly, a response. But it wasn't the response we expected. It jarred us and froze us for a brief moment. As if in choreographed move, they all quickly snapped their heads towards us, all 6 pairs of identical eyes on identical faces, frames, and identical hairstyles, coldly stared. It was like staring into a mirror that is facing another, seeing the exact replicas of oneself repeated indefinitely. But here it wasn't my face, but another, and then they shouted in unison, "Go away." Suddenly, another shout woke me from my shock and disbelief. This time it was from the back seat. "Drive now." On a side road, I was half a block away from the "What was that?" Another voice. "We have to go back. Turn around. Let's follow them. And remember, small town fun. Why the hell not? We've got nothing better to do." We're now only a small town block away, and we flip around and head back. We were met with the void of where they once stood. They were completely gone. It's a dark street, nowhere for them to go. Street lights, business lights, house lights, nothing. If they went into a building, a light would be on. No buildings to go in that amount of time. Just gone. We tried to make sense of it and drove along the street that separated the block, and we had just driven down and nothing was there. So there were 6 that time, and they actually said go away. They actually spoke, but there was no missing time.
Is that the first story you've come across where they've actually spoke? Because I don't think when I was looking through any of the stories, from the little ones to the big ones, did I come across ones where they actually communicated other than a harsh glance.
I want to say I'm sure there are some tales out there, but I've not really gone into them.
Adds a creepy element.
Yeah. And there's that horror film jump scare in there of all 6 heads snapping round at the same time.
Hell yeah. Shit me up.
Whilst looking, I did find a Reddit entry from someone, I think, calling themselves W666Will, saying that there was an episode that took place in a cemetery in America. And I believe, here we're talking about Ghost Adventures, the TV show. So there was an episode that took place in a cemetery in America. I believe they said they had police patrolling the area to keep things safe. And at some point, they see 3 cloaked figures walking outside the cemetery. Billy freaks out, and I think they left. Upon viewing, I had no knowledge of mirror men phenomena, nor was it mentioned in the show. Now, I tracked down this episode and watched it, and it was the episode where, I can't remember where they were, but it's easily found. They were where Richard Ramirez, the serial killer, the Night Stalker, had apparently, when he used to run away from home and do his little black magic things, were in this cemetery.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, he'd do his devil worship in there, and he'd say it was somewhere he'd stay when he ran away from, I think, his abusive home. So there is a point where Billy, one of the newer members of Ghost Adventures, was investigating on his own, alone with a cameraman. Yeah. And something catches his eye, and the camera goes across, and you see 3 figures, all cloaked. They're in the distance, and they're quite blurry because there's street traffic and civilization lights on the other side of them, so they're a bit blurry. But you can see enough for them to make out that these 3 figures are equally spaced apart and in sync, walking. And he freaks out because it's Ghost Adventures, they're looking for ghosts. And he's like, eek, and runs off. That ends there. It's seconds long, is this clip, but you can clearly see these 3 figures. But
that's quite cool.
There's no mention of mirrored men because why would there be? No, no one knows what mirrored men are. That is the only footage of mirrored men I've been able to source. But yeah, Ghost Adventures, I've managed to find a copy of that episode.
So they're pretty elusive creatures. I think as well, when I was looking through, as well as your stories, there was a lot of kind of little random encounters where somebody would walk past a window and there'd be a delayed mirrored reaction, as if the reflection looking back was
catching up.
Yeah, or sentient, like it was different. And I came across, obviously it's BS, but still fun to read, where you get the old look in a mirror, but the reflection maybe does something different, like smiles back.
Oh, there's a few creepy videos, like the little girl having her hair brushed.
Yes, yeah. I think things like that.
And then the face turns and it's a bit demonic. That's creepy as hell.
Yeah.
But creepy.
And then you can go down, the whole rabbit hole of mirrors being portals to other worlds and kind of crap like that, which I'm not really that down for. But
This doesn't. I think mirrors are their own beast. As far as mirrored men go, the only link there is the word mirror, because
this is it. Yeah, it's probably important to kind of maybe separate the two. I think that's the thing about mirrored men in general is, like you said, it's a lot of different encounters, a lot of different behavior, a lot of different stories. You can kind of maybe ball it up, but when does that reflection not become a mirrored man? And yeah, I think it's important to maybe separate the two.
well, since making my notes for this, in fact, this is literally 2, maybe 3 nights ago, I put my headphones in and I went to sleep. I don't know if it was the podcast was called this or the episode, but it was Glitches in the Matrix. There was one story. Now, bearing in mind, I was waking up when I heard this, so I could be making the whole thing up. But there was one of 3 mirrored men, and what stood out was the way they were walking in this description. What they were doing, they had straight backs, okay, with their arms out backwards at right angles, so the top of their arms were up back, so their elbows are sticking backwards, and their forearms are kind of just dangly.
Okay.
And they're walking with straight backs and bent knees
That's creepy.
in a line, and they're walking like that with just the arms hanging loosely, but up. The elbows were up, and they all turned their heads, but like a hung person, you're like kind of sideways.
Yeah.
And there was that story, and then another story came on from a girl who saw one person. So it wasn't really a mirrored man, because remember, this is people telling glitch in the Matrix stories. And what this was, they saw a silhouette of a person, but what they described on how they were walking was exactly the same as what these description of these mirrored men was, with the arms back, elbows up, loose forearms, the bent knees and the straight back, walking. Kind of like one of John Travolta's dances in Pulp Fiction when he's like does the tiptoe thing with his hands back. Slightly cooler than a mirrored man, but that was what came to my mind. But this silhouette walking like that, again with his head down but turned to the side, looking at the person, and the silhouette went under a streetlight, but remained a silhouette.
Ooh.
So that was them too. I just thought they were interesting, the fact that 2 separate stories. One was very Mirror Man-like, but the other one it's not a Mirrored Man story, but had the same gait.
Yeah. I think that was one of my, other than aliens, one of my main theories when I was going through and researching stories, because like I said, I came across a lot of pretty much kind of like mirrored stories, as opposed to seeing the entities kind of like walking around and things like that. But the ones where they did sort of physically interact or get close to the mirrored man, but the mirrored man seemed to, mirror their movements, but maybe just slightly off. And I kind of thought that sort of perfectly explains maybe like a glitch in the Matrix, like you said, but almost like we're seeing ourselves in a parallel dimension. That mirrored man might be you in another parallel timeline that's seeing you and thinking, what the hell is this? I kind of got that from the mirrored behavior. That's what I really liked about it, because I wasn't getting a lot of stories of attacks. These things weren't walking up to people and twisting their head off or doing some scary stuff. It was all very like creepy, but not really like that much of a threat. You just didn't know what it was or what they were up to, and that was kind of the main.
Well, it's the not knowing, yeah, I think.
That's it. But then to go down the completely innocent route, that's you. That's just you in another dimension, and it's wondering what the hell you're doing. Thought that was kind of cool.
That's me in the universe where I walk funny.
This is it. Or it might be you in the universe where you're a millionaire and you're like,
And walking funny because I can. Because I'm
exactly,
rich.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
This is it.
Fair enough. So, theories that I've come across, and I think I'm pretty set on my theory now. However, one from Reddit, a quick one, which has gone down close to what you've just said. A fella called Noel Angel 112 says, I think this one man split in time and this fracture surrounds him, reflecting his image, which is why those who witness him lose time. They fall through the fracture. This is my theory for if they are real. Because there are tons of Reddit threads about mirrored men.
Yeah. They seem to be, it's not someone who really frequents Reddit a lot. They seem to be quite popular in the lore because they're just creepy.
Now, I can't really talk about time fractures and I don't know enough. It's
You see, that's what swings it. Well, that's what swings it from the other dimension theory and back to aliens, because, I mean, the only logical explanation for a time dilation is that they're stealing you for some probing. And then they put you back like nothing happened, dust you off.
from hooping.
Yeah, and you're left waddling away.
So, other theories. So it sounds like there would be some type of men in black, if that's indeed what they are. They usually appear after UFO or cryptid sightings and seek out the people who saw the events directly to question them and basically threaten to silence them about it without ever actually threatening them. Most people tend to get very uncomfortable around them and just go along with what they say to get them to leave. And they've been known to impersonate people that their targets are expecting to meet for the first time or are familiar with but have never met in person. They do this to gain their target's trust and open a conversation with them. There are several different descriptions, but the most common is that they are thin, middle-aged white men with no features that make them stand out. They're usually very pale and thin, wear black suits, and move in a robotic manner and speak in a monotone voice. Additionally, they usually drive black Lincoln cars. I think the 1960 models in particular, but I could be wrong about that. All the Chevy.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm not digging that one, because that's, you're just pulling in the Men in Black. Okay, Men in Black.
Oh, I'm not down with that one at all because there's no mirrored men similar. Well, there are similarities in the monotone or the fact that they're robotic, and that's where it ends for me. If
Yeah.
we're going to go, let you know my feelings on UFOs, and they will become apparent as we do UFO episodes, much to Lee's chagrin. But let's say it's real. Let's say it's aliens. Because they move in such a robotic form and they're emotionless and they just look and there's time loss, they sound more like drones to me than actual aliens. I think they're controlled because if they're all moving in sync, like the second story says, it's like they're all moving as one mind. It sounds like they're being controlled by a particular individual, like a drone, and maybe they're there to scout or take samples. But all these sightings seem to have, like, they've been come across. It's not like they've been targeted until they've been noticed. So they could be scouting, wrecking, looking out for hunting, maybe, but nobody's been, it appears, directly like sought after.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
There's a chance encounter which ends bad.
But yeah, I can't dig that one. Definitely, yeah, I'm definitely calling the distinction on that one. I would think, it pulls away from the lore of it as well. These things are, other than the one instance, these things are silent. And Yeah, I agree with your drone theory. As we know, aliens have infiltrated aspects of the military, and they're going to send their own cleanup team to do the job. So,
A bus home of its own.
I think that scene is so murky now. Even I'm losing a little bit of faith with it all. It's not fun anymore. But anyway, like you say, that's a new bus home.
Okay, now another theory. This is a big one, and it's more. I'm more inclined to go with this. Now, this is based off the focus of Mirrored Men has been on the fact that there's 3, 4, 6, 2, 1 people, entities involved, and the scene, there's time loss, done. That's the story. That's Mirrored Men. Now, I'm thinking these are smaller parts of a bigger picture, which is why we only see one sometimes, or this several. So I'm going to quote some that somebody said in Reddit, and then I went into what they said, and I found my answer. Okay. So Automatic Point 1318 says, I'm not sure if any other listeners have noted this before, either on Reddit or on another platform, but there are similarities between many of the witness descriptions of the Mirrored Men's appearances and that of the genii cuculati, hooded spirits, that show up in Romano-Celtic artwork, carvings and sculptures. Singular hooded figures are not uncommon in Romano-Celtic artwork throughout Europe, where they most likely acted as messengers for deities. In Britain, however, they are uniquely portrayed in triplicate form. 3 hooded individuals standing or walking next to each other. Because these British portrayals do not have any accompanying inscriptions, what their function was and why they were depicted in triplicate is unknown. Now, I know a lot of the Mirrored Men things happen in America, there's one in Australia, but this is Britain. Now, Banshees are specifically an Irish thing, and has made its way to America through people moving over to America and taking their traditions. So that's where I'm going with this one. Okay. So go on.
I was going to say, what about if the Mirrored Men were actually the 3 kings from that there Jesus story? Maybe these guys go back in time and we've just kind of
maybe so.
Wrote them off as other things.
So they weren't kings, they were magi, which makes it more. I think they were like those fellas in The Mummy who were protecting, with tattoos on their cheeks. I think they were more like that. Wizards. So, anyway, I looked more into the genii cuculati, and
I've never heard of that.
Well, allow me to enlighten you. So, mysterious hooded beings. Now, we're going to go away from the Mirrored Men a little bit here. I'm going to go off on a tangent, and then, as smooth as butter, I'm going to bring it back in. All right? Just be prepared. So, mysterious hooded beings. They are known by the Latin name genii cuculati, which is plural of genio cuculato, or hooded genius. Throughout Britain and Gaul, which was France, there are small altarpieces in stone where they are represented votive figures carved in the same stone and sometimes in bronze, although it cannot be assured that they wear a cape and a hood. Sometimes a hooded being is depicted, but in many cases, sometimes, especially in England, they appear in 3s. Although these figures resemble the Greco-Roman god Telephorus, hooded assistant of Asclepius, a Roman god of medicine, the genius cuculatus has been recognised as a peculiar and typical of Celtic cultures. And as you know, early Brits were Celts, essentially. These mysterious beings come from popular tradition, lesser spirits connected with folk wisdom, agricultural rites, and healing, always invoked and honoured by the popular classes, perhaps because the hoods and capes along history are used by spirits, demons, or gods, never by elder gods. So it is thought that probably these hooded beings who walked the roads and not travelled in night were beings to whom they were asked for favours of protection, care of crops, and all the daily activities of peasant life. They appear in fairy tales such as dwarves, gnomes, or brownies. They may not be the same, but they resemble each other, and of course, they have a lot in common because everything that has come from us, from them in folklore, tells us that they were deities of Mother Earth and spirits associated with the work of man and the activity of the houses. In essence, guardian spirits. This ties in with the legends of brownies that lived even in houses and mansions, as stated by numerous testimonies of people who came to see them and to live with them in time and have them lost in time and have been clouded with the obfuscation of most radical academicism. So, the case of Loch Fyne is very famous in Scotland, and that is every family of some substance in these islands were enchanted by a spirit who was called Brownie. And I believe there were a couple of brownies in Willow, those little tiny guys.
Okay. Ah, nice.
Played by Kevin Pollock, I believe, and who did different types of work. And this was which is why families for whom they worked made offerings to him from different products of the land. Okay. Thus, many, when the brownie beat his milk, or brewed their
That's one
beer.
word for it.
I know. They poured milk into the hole of a stone so that he could drink it. They called it the brownie stone. But in the last 20 or 30 years, it's hardly been seen, only on rare occasions. According to Ellis Davidson, an English academic and a scholar of European paganism, states in her book, Gods and Myths in Northern Europe, that it's evident that Genius Cucullatus is the image of a connected guardian spirit with the natural world, intimately linked to farms and they help keep the cattle, helped in the stables, and assisted the farmer in working the land in general with harvest, and cared for by the people because they found they were beneficial to the families, but only if they were making offerings. While folklore is full of testimonies of encounters with hooded beings dressed in black and normally tall, I don't think this is the case. These cases they continue to produce, but consider they are other types of beings not beneficial. There are spirits and beings that are not beneficial to man, cases of violent attacks. That brings in the jinn, which is probably another bus home, but they can be good and helpful or bad or just plain dickheads. Every culture has them. Now, spirits linked to nature who worked intimately with us at the time when we could see them, and we at the time were scared of them. There were still sacred connections and were intact at that time. Now, that's when lights came from candles. When it was dark, and we relied on spirits to help us. Pre-science, so to speak. And they say once we become, the more we learn, the blinder we get. But you say that we simply do not see, which is, it comes down to ghosts as well. We don't see them because we've been too educated,
Technology, because we're staring at screens.
Yeah, why children see ghosts, but not adults because children haven't been jaded yet.
Yep,
So
by that.
Now, what we're saying, what I get from that is there's the liminal spaces that they're liminal to us now, but to them, it's the earth, it's the woods, it's the fields.
Yeah, they've always been here. That's what I'm getting from that. They're the old gods.
They've got no purpose to go into a city or into a built-up area.
Yeah,
Or if they do,
exactly.
they're not meant to, which is probably why when they are seen in built-up areas, it's by accident. So the caped spirits. So basically, these are put into like earth gods and what have you. Now, a link has been made, which is where I'm going to bring us back in here. When we had all these earth spirits and we saw them and we believed them, and apparently we lived in harmony with them, provided we left offerings, and if we didn't, they'd do something mischievous. I don't think they'd do anything to kill, but they'd make him lose whatever back then's version of the car keys or whatever, you know. So
Yep.
we have things like in Scandinavia, you know, there's the trolls. They're the same thing. Like it says, dwarfs, gnomes, brownies, elves, and the fae folk. Okay. Now, fae being the land, and the people from fae are fairy. Okay. So when
This is
people
Hellboy 2.
potentially, because I do, you know, that's based on fact. For a fact,
This,
I know
Yep.
this because, well, I know why Hellboy has a rather large forearm. It's
There
because
you go.
he pulled his BMW police bike over
There you go.
and he made a mess of his visor. But moving on. So where you have mushroom circles or stone circles, and people have said, you know, who are wandering to sit in them and disappear or pass out for long periods of time. And one of the things that is said when that happens to people is, and you know, in legend, when you see the fairies, you'll join the fairy dance, which means you'll join them, and an hour with them can mean 5 years with us, or maybe even the other round. It could be an hour with us, and you'll live with them for 10 years. And if your baby goes missing, or they change it with a changeling, so we would raise the fairy kid, and then they'd swap them back. But my thoughts, let's say it's the fairy folk, okay, and the fairy dance. So when we see 3, 4, 5, 6 people all moving in sync, is this not just a little glimpse of the dance? If we're all doing the same dance, we're all moving in sync.
It's an interesting theory.
So the loss of time can be that time was spent in the fairy dance. If we're talking brownies, trolls, because there are stories of hikers going missing when they sit down to have their lunch in stone circles, mushroom circles, and that's the trolls that take them. Over here, we get took by the fairies. Over in Ireland, I think it's fairies and brownies and something else, I can't remember. But it all comes together. Now, these stories are from people who have seen the mirrored men. But what about the people who have seen the mirrored men but not told the story? Or, you know, they haven't been able to tell the story because they haven't come back. Which then brings us into the missing 411.
Okay.
Which is its own episode as well.
That's a good theory.
I'm thinking the mirrored men is just a part of a bigger, older story.
I like that. I like that you're open to that, because your usual skeptical way, I thought you'd be passing these mugs off. But now
It's entire bollocks.
Oh, well.
But if it was
I'm
real,
not so sure.
I'm happy to discuss if it's real. That's my stance. But I need to see, you know, I'm going to need a bit of evidence. But as a theory, it's that.
Right. Look, you know me. You know I always.
Oh, I know you buy into it all.
You know, I'll go to the most logical kind of viewpoint, and since discovering the very basics, and I say the basics, it's a bit of a stretch of quantum physics. We know there are possibly infinite dimensions out there, Scott. Infinite dimensions.
Seen Spider.
It's logical to me. This is it. It's logical to me that these guys are definitely passing through. The glitches in the Matrix. We're seeing stuff that we shouldn't be seeing. They know.
Or is that how we're explaining the fae folk?
It all links. It's all the same for me. It's the fairy folk. It's the aliens. It's all the things that we describe as just not knowing what they are. But at the end of the day, we can't see what these things are until something glitches, something happens. Like you say, there's a lot of stories about them being around UFO crashes. I'm fully on the page now that UFOs aren't from other planets. They're just interdimensional things coming through. And I think it's becoming more and more logical the more advanced technology gets, and we're potentially seeing a lot of these things on radars and different kind of light spectrums. Infrared here from the UAP world is definitely the one. What if we smack on a pair of infrared glasses and we see these mirrored men walking around all the time? It's not
like
that
From Beyond, H.P. Lovecraft coming in there.
Yeah, or they live with Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Yeah, but he dealt with that issue. And he was all out of gun. Yeah.
This is it.
He did it without gun.
But I challenge you to, challenge one of the mirrored men to a 80s kung fu battle and see how far that gets you.
Okay. Let's say that and I face off. We'll just say, make it easy on them, on me. 6 mirrored men, right?
Okay.
In front of me. And I jump up I'm wearing some Chuck Norris tactical jeans.
Okay. Cut-offs.
No, tactical jeans. They're slightly flared at the bottom, but they've got quite an elasticated crotch for badass high kicks.
Cool.
So,
and this is, just so I'm getting this right, this is you and 6 dudes, yeah?
6 mirrored men.
Cool. Okay.
Now, one of them flips me the bird. Let's say all 6 of them have just flipped me the bird. How does this play out? Do I leap in the air with an absolutely awe-inspiring roundhouse kick and kick one of them? Do they all feel it? And then if one punches me and only one connects, do I get hit with the force of 6? Or am I just getting hit by one person? Because obviously the other 5 are going to miss.
I get it. If a mirrored man screams in the woods, do the other hear it?
Exactly. Does a mirrored man shit in the woods?
I'll say
6 times. I mean, the poo bag expenses per month is high enough.
This is it.
So,
that's a interesting business opportunity. Instead of a dog walker, walk your mirrored men. Groups of 6 only.
You could walk them. I could 18 easy. I could take 18 for a walk quite happily. But that's beside the point. But do you reckon you could fight mirrored men?
I don't think they'd want to fight me. They seem very passive. I think they're busy doing their own shit. And when we see them, they know we shouldn't be seeing them. So they kind of stare back,
put you to sleep.
Give us the nod. Yep. Give us the wink. Give us a smile. Do whatever. Just to say, mate.
So they're nice. Looking. So if you were to leave them an offering, like chuck them a Snickers, they'll be happy and they may not put you to sleep.
No, I'm not saying they're nice. I'm saying they're impartial. They don't care about you. They are above you. You are a slug to those guys, okay? They don't care. They've just come through our basic bitch dimension, took a wrong turn. Even mirrored men make mistakes.
They make a mistake. They all make a mistake.
This is it, bro. And again, on that theory, I think, when you see multiple and they're all acting the same, this is how we perceive the other dimension. Obviously, if we're seeing a glimpse into their realm, we're not going to see it straight, okay? We're going to see it all jacked. And that's maybe why we're seeing almost like a sequence of what they're doing. Yeah, this is all tying up to me. I've gone and sold myself on this. I think these guys are 100% legit. And I'm going to be honest, Scott, I came into this a little bit skeptical, thinking, I'm not so sure about this, but yeah, I'm calling it legitimate.
It's a grower, isn't it? The more you think about it, the more theories you come up with. So hopefully, Derek Stay Spooky Hayes is going to hear this, and he's either going to like it, he's either going to be overcome with indifference, or he's going to be so put out he might do a diss track about us. That'd be cool.
Or he might not know what the hell we're talking about because of our northern accents.
Okay. Good night, Lee. I'm done.